Welcome to another chilling tale on Ghost Stories Unleashed. I'm Michael, your guide through the shadows tonight. Picture this: an isolated village trapped in the fog of secrets and fear called Gallow Hollow. Perched on the edge of nowhere, it's whispered to hold an ancient curse, one that spells doom for the soul who dares tread its haunted grounds. Imagine being drawn to this spectral web, as if invisible fingers are urging you to uncover truths that have long since been buried. Our story begins with one such soul, a man weighed down by his own demons. Meet Detective Lucas Monroe, a man seasoned in the art of unearthing the hidden, yet forever pursued by the ghosts of his own past mistakes. Lucas arrives in Gallow Hollow seemingly on a mission, but in his heart, he's searching for redemption, perhaps even forgiveness. The villagers speak in hushed tones about the strange and tragic deaths that have claimed their own, unexplained, terrifying, as if each victim had been touched by some dark, unseen hand. As Lucas delves deeper, he finds more than he bargained for: a tangled web of old family feuds, forbidden practices, and whispers of a supernatural force that preys upon the living. But beware, Gallow Hollow does not yield its secrets easily. Each question answered unearths another two to confound him. People seem to almost disappear into the fog, leaving their stories untold, their lives unraveling in eerie silence. Listeners, prepare to shadow Lucas as he navigates the veiled paths of this cursed village. Locked within Gallow Hollow are truths destined to shatter his reality, challenge his beliefs, and perhaps, if he's not careful, claim him too. Tonight, tread carefully with me, and let's unveil the mysteries shrouding this haunted village. Feel the chill? That's the touch of Gallow Hollow. Stay with me now. Let's dive into The Curse of Gallow Hollow. If you dare. Evelyn Hart tightened her grip on the steering wheel as she peered through the dense fog smothering the winding road. Even with the headlights cutting through the murk, every turn felt like venturing blindly into a dark, unknown abyss. The village of Gallow Hollow loomed ahead, her destination, a place cloaked with whispered legends and the ink of forgotten histories. As the narrow road finally gave way to a clearing, letting in a muted light, Evelyn could see the vague outlines of Gallow Hollow. The village seemed untouched by time, a relic of an era where secrets were as commonplace as the mist swirling in the streets. Have to see it before I can solve it, Evelyn murmured to herself, a reassuring habit she developed over the years. Parking the car near what appeared to be the village square, she stepped out and felt the chill embrace of the air immediately. Her breath solidified in front of her as she surveyed her surroundings. There was an uncanny stillness, a silence so profound it seemed as though the village itself held its breath, waiting. She made her way towards the heart of Gallow Hollow, the pub where she'd been told she'd find the village's unofficial spokesperson, Isaac Collier. Her mind buzzed with reports she'd studied. 3 mysterious deaths, each victim marked with an ancient symbol carved into their skin, a chilling trademark that defied logical explanation. Pushing open the door of the pub, Evelyn was greeted by the low murmur of voices, the scent of old wood and smoke. It was warm, a welcome relief from the icy tendrils outside. Pausing, she let her eyes adjust before approaching the bar. "Detective Hart, I presume," a voice said, drawing her attention to an older man with eyes that seemed too sharp and too knowing. "Isaac Collier?" she replied, extending a gloved hand. He nodded, shaking her hand firmly. "Welcome to Gallow Hollow, though I can't say you'll find the hospitality all that warm. The fog has a way of chilling folks' spirits and trust." Evelyn offered a soft smile and took a seat. "I hear you've had some trouble lately. I'm here to help piece it together." Isaac leaned forward, lowering his voice as if he were confessing a sin. 3 people, all gone. Their families say it's the curse, but I've seen curses come and go. They're usually just folk looking to blame something for their misfortune. This feels different. Evelyn listened intently, nodding. The symbols. What can you tell me about them? Ancient marks. They show up in old writings, the kind the village historians would study. We have a few books at the library you might want to look at. Pretty grim stuff, those symbols. His eyes darkened for a moment. They speak of binding, of chains on the soul. You believe someone's deliberately marking these people? I believe this isn't the work of ghosts and goblins, Isaac sighed. We like our stories down here, but this, you can almost feel it. Evelyn thanked him and made her way to her lodgings, a small bed and breakfast that smelled faintly of lavender and dust. After settling in, she fetched her notebook, jotting down her observations. Her thoughts lingered on the symbols, the eerie patience with which the village watched and waited. Several hours later, Evelyn found herself at the local library, a small but sturdy building that had escaped the decays of time with an almost heroic stubbornness. Inside, the dim light struggled to summon a warmth suitable for reading. The librarian, a wiry woman named Agnes, led her to a dimly lit corner lined with old tomes that reeked of history and disuse. "These volumes have what you're looking for," she said softly. "And mind the dust, it doesn't take kindly to interruption." Evelyn scanned the spines, pulling out a few volumes that showed the wear of eager fingers. She turned the pages slowly, absorbing tales of old, the symbols, their meanings, the warnings repeated over the ages. Binding, imprisonment, soul wrangling. The words danced in the pathways of her mind. Hours slipped by as pages turned. The tinkle of a bell announced the closing time, and Evelyn retraced her steps into the awaiting fog. She spent the evening sifting through her findings, connecting threads that might unravel the village's curse. It was superstition, she reasoned. Enough fear could drive the best minds to dark corners. The next day, Evelyn walked the paths just outside town, near the sites where each of the deceased had been found. The fog hugged closer here, as if to keep the village's secrets guarded. She spoke with some locals, meeting guarded eyes and hushed voices, gathering pieces of a puzzle too eager to remain hidden. A voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You're the detective, aren't you?" Turning, she noticed a slight girl, her features strangely shadowed. Her eyes were bright, alert, and familiar with hidden things. "I'm Evelyn." "And you are?" "Maya," she said. "You'll find him, I think." Puzzled, Evelyn asked. "Find who?" Maya smiled slightly, a knowing tap of mysteries in her eyes. "The one who marks. The symbols mark truths. They're keys to his chains. He waits." Before Evelyn could reply, Maya had whirled away, vanishing into the mist like the whisper she had become. The village seemed to pulse around Evelyn, vibrating with ancient tales half remembered, urging her onward. She knew this was no ordinary investigation. Gallow Hollow was a puzzle of its own making, and deep down, beneath the threads of logic that formed her world, she felt the brush of something else, something waiting to be unveiled, and perhaps something darker to be released. As night sucked in the colors of the day, Evelyn found herself once more in front of her lodgings, brushing the cold from her coat. She paused a moment, feeling the weight of the place, breathing in the heavy air. It held the taste of earth and hidden things, whispering secrets through the shadows. The narrative she'd come to unravel. Would reason reign over fear, or would the foggy veil of superstition cling tighter to this village's heart? With resolve tightening her steps, she entered, knowing tomorrow would dive deeper yet. For now, the tangled whispers of the village and the chance for answers swirled around, dimming the murk of the ever-lingering fog. The morning fog lay thick over Gallow Hollow, a spectral curtain that muted the world's edges. Evelyn Hart's breath fogged the glass as she took a moment at the small window of her room, letting clarity settle in the pit of her stomach. She tried to shake off the lingering dream of twisted faces swallowed by mist, calling to her in tangled whispers. Finished with her morning rituals, she set out toward the library again. The villagers, spectral shadows in their own right, moved sparsely in the streets. Their silence was infectious, igniting Evelyn's curiosity anew. At the library, Agnes was rearranging a stack of books. The woman's eyes flickered with something more when she noticed Evelyn. "You're steady as she goes, aren't you?" Agnes greeted, her voice holding a strange mix of admiration and concern. "Trying," Evelyn replied. "But there's more to this, isn't there? More than rattled nerves and ancient superstitions." Agnes paused, then leaned close, her voice diminishing to a strained whisper. "This place holds onto its own, detective. Grasping hands hidden beneath the fog and shadows older than our memories." Her face contorted momentarily, consumed by a past sunken deep into sorrow. "The symbols mark more than skin. Mine bore chains." A chill slithered down Evelyn's spine. "What happened, Agnes?" Agnes took a shuddering breath. "The symbols marked my brother years ago, a pain that never quite healed. My family crushed into the hollows of fear, and the village. It called for the curse." Evelyn's heart quickened with a sense of urgency. How did it happen? What do you remember? Fog was ominous that night, thicker than thieves. My brother Tom, he was found in the woods, symbols carved as if by unseen hands. Her eyes clouded, staring back at some place within. We never understood, only felt the grip of loss tighten over us. Evelyn lingered on this as she left the library, Agnes's words echoing as ghostly warnings. The villagers moved around her like wary echoes, whispers and suspicious eyes meeting her shadowed path. The watchful eyes, a constant tickle at her senses, suggested secrets buried shallow, like bones beneath loose dirt. As she walked through the village, passing by cottages with curtains trembling at scant breezes, a group of women stared, wary before breaking their conversation as she drew near. "She won't listen," one of them muttered. "Thinks herself above it all," another replied under her breath. "You know what they say," the third added. "The cursed leads the cursed." Evelyn ignored them, but a shiver zipped along her spine like a spider's thread. An unshakable feeling of being watched fixed itself over her. Despite priding herself on being grounded, a tapestry of doubt and shadows began weaving through her thoughts. Later, while dining quietly at the local eatery, Evelyn noticed murmurs shift and dart between tables when her glance strayed their way. A man seated nearby, tall, hushed, with eyes like dark pits of midnight, caught her gaze and nodded solemnly. "You'd do well to leave this place," he said, not unkindly. "Care to elaborate?" "The man who marked others. People say he's resting his hunt, but his mark, it trails here. Still," the man spoke, his words laced with underlying foreboding. "It hain't been forgotten. Why stay if you think there's danger? Roots anchor us deep," he gestured with roughened hands. "Hard to believe in escape when ghosts thread your steps." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I've been hearing a lot about this curse, but here's the truth. I don't believe in such things. There's an answer beyond what's whispered across fog and fear," the man chuckled dryly. "You might not find the truth as comforting as disbelief, detective." Evelyn blinked at his words, crafting her thoughts into sharper resolve. The pressing fatigue of a day's search weighed upon her as she wandered back to the little inn she now considered home base. As she approached, the unsettling sense of watchfulness draped her shoulders like the fog wrapped the village. Within the solitude of her room, feeling the pause in her heartbeat, she swore something, or someone, paused just beyond the window's edge. She closed the curtains against the thickening dark. "It's just the case getting to you," she whispered to herself, more for solace than truth. Yet the weight of secrets swirled around her still. That evening, Evelyn sat with her notes, piecing together fragments in her orderly way, connecting the path that twined through symbols and superstitions. She paused, looking toward the window again, beyond which lay the night's embrace. Her mind sketched the village map, marking places where shadows pooled deeper. The puzzle shifted within reach, clarity woven along the fibers of her logic. Suddenly, an elusive whisper at the threshold of hearing tickled the air, speaking of tales unspoken. Not for the first time, Evelyn felt the unease brewing. She could almost sense the fog peering back through the window, watching with ancient eyes. Sleep came ready but unwelcome, and when it took her, whispers wove through her dreams, siren calls layered in forgotten tongues, beckoning. Evelyn would confront Gallow Hollow's web the next day with renewed purpose. As she descended into slumber, the symbols danced through her mind like macabre constellations, offering threads that promised to unravel truths long knotted. Tomorrow would bring clarity, or more mysteries yet. But one thing remained certain. Evelyn stood on the edge of a darkness carefully concealed, eager to understand without compromise what the villagers so feared to name. She would go on, even if the presence lurking in the depths of her perception trailed her closer than her own shadow. The morning sun did its best to break through the dense gray shroud, but only succeeded in creating lighter patches within the prevailing fog. Evelyn awoke refreshed, a rare clarity settling over her as she mapped out the day in her mind. She separated the whispers from truths as she prepared to meet Father Gregory, the village priest known for his knowledge of ancient scripts. The pathway to the church was lined with moss-covered stones, whispering of ages past. The church itself seemed a bastion against the fog, its stone exterior strong and unyielding. Evelyn stepped into the hushed tranquility, her footsteps echoing within the high-vaulted sanctuary. Father Gregory, a middle-aged man with silver hair and steady eyes like wells into clear waters, greeted her within. "Detective Hart," he acknowledged gravely, extending a hand. "Father Gregory, thank you for meeting with me," Evelyn replied, her professional demeanor seasoned with an undercurrent of urgency. "Isaac mentioned you'd been asking about the symbols," Gregory began as they moved toward his study, a small room overwhelmed by shelves sagging under the weight of books. "It's more than curiosity, I'm afraid," Evelyn admitted. "I believe they might be connected to the deaths in a way we haven't considered, something beyond the physical." Gregory nodded, gesturing to a cleared space on his desk, where several ancient tomes lay open. Very few here read the old languages anymore. Superstition thrives where knowledge fades. Evelyn glanced at the faded pages, their ink holding the marks of ancients, symbols that twisted familiar yet alien shapes. "These," she motioned, pointing at a cluster of symbols drawn in a manuscript, "are these the same as the ones found marked on the victims?" Gregory surveyed the marks with a learned eye. "These are sacred symbols, Detective. When correctly understood, they convey protection, boundaries, a holy locking, if you will." Evelyn's brows knitted. "Do you think someone's trying to protect something, or perhaps keep something hidden?" Gregory hesitated. "These aren't Christian rites, you understand. Their origins trace back further, to pagan roots deeply intertwined with the earth, with what lies within it." "Does it mention how they're used?" Evelyn pressed. "In part," Gregory replied, fingers carefully turning pages. "A ritual for sealing, guided binding chants, alignments with celestial bodies. All elements required. And yet, here in Gallow Hollow, the lines between protection and imprisonment might have blurred." Evelyn's thoughts raced. If someone is reenacting these rituals, perhaps they believe they're recreating old bindings. Maybe the symbols aren't the threat, but a countermeasure. It's plausible, the priest agreed. Yet why do so now? Why here? Evelyn shook her head. I need to piece together who might wield old rituals with such risk. The victims had shared histories, a link I've been missing. Gregory tapped his chin, thinking. I'll continue translating these texts, see if there's any additional context. Perhaps something was forgotten or overlooked. Evelyn thanked him and left, her mind a swirling sea of half-shaped theories. Outside, the village seemed to sigh, as though the fog felt her progress and sought to snare it in its diaphanous coils. Her next stop was the librarian, Agnes, who had been a bridge to the past. Perhaps within the depths of layered village history lay an answer. Detective, Agnes greeted at the library's door, her eyes keen with untold stories. Agnes, Evelyn began, have you heard of anyone practicing the old ways? Those rituals tied to the symbols? Agnes led her to a patch of faded sunlight filtering through a dusty window. Years ago, those traditions held fast. Births, deaths, every season's shift marked by rites. Yet a generation back, fear gripped the heartstrong. Power unused is power safe. She paused, her gaze distant. But belief has a way of enduring quietly. Any one person? Evelyn inquired, pressing gently. Agnes considered this. Old Jameson spoke of such things before his passing, but a rumor, nothing grounded. Evelyn stored this nugget of possibility. Thank you, Agnes. I have some translations to wait on, but if anything else comes to mind. Agnes nods thoughtfully. I'll whisper with the dust, detective. As twilight began its creeping dance across the village, Evelyn returned to the church, hoping Father Gregory might have uncovered more. The church interior bore a comforting glow against the chilling exterior, the flicker of candles joining in soft illumination. Gregory met her with a nod, guiding her to the study where a cluster of loose papers marked progress. I've found instances cited of fervent rituals during malign nights, seeking expulsion or tolerance of unseen forces, he explained, indicating passages. Evelyn noted the weathered phrases, hints, and wordplay deciphered. That's what we faced with the deaths. Left exposed without completion, the ritual turned back onto them. Gregory frowned. If so, we must find the remnants of this belief before anyone else joins their ranks. I'll pursue Jameson's connections, Evelyn promised. What you've shown me here points to focused attempts, not random. It gives shape to the shadow. They discussed further grit, particulars drawn from ink and elder tales, until the church bells announced the night's deepening pall. Evelyn took leave of Father Gregory. Her thoughts wound tighter around the threadbare facts that tried to elude certainty. As her feet found familiar paths back to her lodgings, the fog seemed less daunting, her steps tempered by a growing sense of proximity to truths perilously close at hand. Not fear, she reminded herself, but readiness. And so, Evelyn Hart stepped into the enveloping night, standing firm against the village's mysteries with steadfast resolve, and the fresh ink of translation crafting a pathway through the murk of Gallow Hollow's haunted saga. The morning began with a heaviness in the air, one that clung to Evelyn Hart's skin as she prepared for the day's descent into the unknown. Her resolve to explore the marshlands tempered the simmering tension Father Gregory's warnings had left swirling in her thoughts. Evelyn packed sparingly, a flashlight, a map of the area scratched with her own notes, and a small notebook filled with the fresh translations of the ancient symbols and rites. She hesitated, the memory of Gregory's sober face lingering with his last words. The marshes have held more than water. The path from the village sloped gently, and soon the cobblestone gave way to softer earth. Soaked terrain cradled her steps. the marshland stretching into an ambiguous haze in the distance, as though the earth folded silently into the womb of Gallow Hollow. A local guide had been suggested, but instinct whispered for solitude. There was a fragility to be observed alone, away from prying eyes and preconceptions. The mist lay ahead, a veil over untouched secrets and remnants caught between time. The marsh's verge greeted her with the sighing rustle of tall grasses, each whisper a secret shared amongst themselves. Evelyn's footing was careful, methodical, her eyes mapping the unfamiliar landscape, clusters of reeds, patches of water clinging to uncertain pathways, the silence. "I need to see," she reminded herself aloud, the sound oddly loud against the consuming quiet. As she ventured deeper, the fog folded around her, tendrils brushing against her skin like searching fingers. Here, the mist was not merely a dampness, it carried weight, a knowing presence that defied cold sense. "Keep to the path," she told herself, consulting her map, tracing a finger along the printed maze. But the marshland seldom offered the luxury of paths, and soon Evelyn found herself relying more on instinct than directions. A troubling awareness simmering. She was not alone. The fog shifted in fluid whispers, enclosing around her. She stilled, hand to chest, feeling the steady thrum of her heart, eyes darting within the amorphous reach of mist. And then, movement, barely perceptible, likely imagined. Yet the marsh drew a more solid presence to the senses, ever closer, deliberate. "Who's there?" Evelyn called, her voice a challenge against the unsettling silence. The only reply was the soft lap of water, a low moan from the grasses swaying with the fog's touch, as soundless as forgotten dreams. She pressed forward, stubbornness in each step, aware of the palpable weight of history watching her. Sweat mingled with fog, clinging as if thick blood. Suddenly, the ground gave way, mud sucking hungrily at her boots, pulling her down. Struggling to maintain balance, she half fell into the wet mire. Wiping mud from her hands, Evelyn gritted her teeth. She refused to relinquish her search's hastily acquired footing. But then, from the corner of her vision, an alteration in the fog, a fleeting shadow, something humanoid perhaps? Her pulse spiked, a quick prickling path. Stay calm," Evelyn breathed, focusing herself. The fog pooled thick around her once more, and instinct turned her forward, a quiet resolve armoring her purpose. Deeper through whispering reeds, the marsh opened to an unearthly closeness. Suddenly, she emerged into a small clearing amid the haze. Evelyn paused, senses flaring. A ring of standing stones, half swallowed by the marsh's relentless hold, rose from the earth. The air here was sharp, crackling with latent energy. Heart steady, she approached, circling the stone sentinels, fingers tracing the cold residue of ancient carvings, echoes of the symbols she'd come to recognize. This was a place neither dead nor wholly alive. Memories of rituals lingering in the silence, understanding unfurled, sudden and sure. Evelyn pulled the map and her notes. Standing stones, ancient symbols. This place was marked by intent, a ritual ground perhaps long abandoned but never forgotten. Realization wove its pattern. Standing here might connect the bodies discovered, but before she could reach into her thoughts, the encroaching mist thickened, magic drawing taut the shroud between presence and obscurity. "I'm on borrowed ground," she voiced softly, as though granting permission. The mist quivered, pulling away like a thoughtful tide, momentarily granting clarity. Then, just as quickly, it surged, a predatory wave urging her backward, pressing her from its grasp. Aware of her surroundings, Evelyn took a step back, acknowledging the unspoken sentinel and the ancient coiled power too eager to test. Her retreat was as deliberate as each prior step into the marsh's willing embrace. Slowly, the fog softened, unfurling like an exhaled sigh exonerating boundaries. By the time her feet found steadier land once more, sweat ran frigid paths down her spine, mixing with the mist's chill. She resisted the urge to glance back, the sensation of presence trailing still close. Emerging onto the solid path, she inhaled deeply, a shiver traveling her senses. The marshlands, forgotten, feared, had relented to her strength, but left her understanding fractured yet potent. As the village rose through the fog's unrelinquished curtain, Evelyn felt worn but accomplished. She cradled fresh knowledge, cradled secrets, the darkness bridged within. Her encounter with the fog, intangible yet tangible, had solidified her insights, connections drawn between ancient practices, the wrought symbols, and the shadows cast within heartbeats of Gallow Hollow. Evelyn returned fortified, ready to confront hidden truths in the light of newfound clarity tucked somewhere beneath knowledge and unsounded fears. The familiar path between the marshlands and Gallow Hollow slowly emerged from the shifting fog as Evelyn Hart made her way back, each step weighed with the gravity of what she had uncovered. The ancient symbols, the standing stones, the inexplicable presence in the mist, they threaded into a tapestry of fear and foreboding that stitched itself into the fabric of the village. As she neared the village proper, a sense of disquiet knitted its way between her thoughts. Something was amiss. The usual whispers and sidelong glances had morphed into silent stares and hushed urgency. Expectation lingered in the air, tense and palpable. Evelyn quickened her pace, her instincts sharpening her senses. Approaching the library, she noted the door ajar, swinging in a breeze too chill for comfort. She hesitated a moment on the threshold, then stepped inside, the worn wooden floor creaking its greeting. "Agnes," she called, the name absorbed into the dark crevices of the library. Silence. Only the shifting echoes of dust and the shadows seemed to pulse in response. Something nudged at her peripheral, scratches on the old wooden desk. Evelyn moved closer, the symbols unmistakably familiar, freshly carved. Her heart dipped, fear inching its icy fingers around her resolve. Evelyn turned on her heel, striding out to find Father Gregory. If anyone might lend clarity or surmise any meaning from this, it was he. The church stood stoically unbiased to the turmoil weaving its narrative in the village. Evelyn found Father Gregory attending to the altar, setting candles alight, their flames flickering against the encroaching gloom. "Father Gregory?" Evelyn breathed, surprising him out of his concentration. "Detective?" he replied, a shadow crossing his face. "Is there news?" "Agnes is gone," she stated, watching his reaction closely. He sighed, shoulders sagging beneath robes like heavy stones. "I feared as much when they began speaking of the curse taking old Agnes," whispers weaving into conviction. Evelyn leaned forward, urgency sharpening her features. "I found new symbols carved in her desk, the same I saw in the marshlands. They target those who probe too far." Gregory nodded grimly, a whisper of shadows reaching out, a warning, or perhaps a threat wrapped in layers of history. "I need to know who else might have delved into these ancient rites. Who might have stirred this hive?" Evelyn pressed. Gregory led her to a tapestry hanging forgotten in the church's history nook, folding it away to reveal etchings beneath. "Here," he said years ago, Marjorie and Tom Jameson were among those who gathered knowledge in private circles. The search for answers became their lament. Agnes mentioned Tom Jameson before, Evelyn recalled. Before her disappearance, did Agnes say anything to you? Anything at all? Gregory closed his eyes momentarily, recollecting. She murmured of searching too deeply, an ominous sign she dismissed as an unspoken summons, a quiet warning silenced by the depth of curiosity. Resolved to trace these threads, Evelyn found herself back on the village's path, remaining vigilant against the shadow's insistent watch. The villagers watched her return with guarded expressions, an understandable hesitance hanging in the air. "Detective Hart," a voice called out, and Evelyn turned to see Maya, the precocious girl she'd encountered on her earlier investigation, stepping forward. "Maya, you're brave to approach," Evelyn said gently. Maya glanced around, the silent reminder of expectations wrapped in whispers. "Careful, miss. The fog heard you in the library. The shadows dance close when you look too deeply." "Someone has to," Evelyn replied softly, squatting to meet the girl's earnest gaze. Maya nodded, her eyes luminous against the encroaching dusk. "Agnes went too far, and they believe 'twas the curse, that it took her, but it ain't right. Not all would agree." "Do you know anything about Tom Jameson or Marjorie?" Evelyn asked, curious what the children of Gallow Hollow absorbed within games of secrets and shadows. They played with darkness, but Marjorie found light. "Some folks say she understood and left them to their shadows," Maya whispered, a shallow sadness echoing in her words. Evelyn stood, brushing her hands as if dispelling the fog cloying at her fingers. "Thank you, Maya. You've helped more than you know." As the remainder of daylight bled into the horizon, Evelyn made her way to the Jameson house, a cottage reclining into charming decay, vines marking time along its contours. Rapping on the door drew a figure into the half-light, a wiry man with a weathered gaze, equal parts weary and wary. "Mr. Jameson?" Evelyn inquired. "Aye, that'd be me," he replied, shifting under the doorway's gaze. "I've been trying to understand these symbols." Evelyn showed him the sketches and notes. A heavy pause, contemplation slinking into comprehension, touched his face. "Can't say I know more than anyone but Marjorie. She kept records of things, her elixirs of truth, the like." After a moment's hesitation and Evelyn's quiet persistence, Tom invited her in. The interior was intricate with organized clutter, a treasure chest of things past blending with things present. On a desk, amidst dusty tomes and peculiar trinkets, one journal lay slightly apart, Marjorie's hand inscribed on its leather surface. Tom gestured. She kept it safe from peering eyes, those who wanted to locate its contents, winnowing truth from lore. Evelyn opened the journal gently, its pages echoing secrets transcended generations. Sketches of symbols danced with notes detailing failed rituals, attempts to abide the tangible and intangible, a convergence of fear and resolution. These symbols, Evelyn considered, no longer a protection. They provoke, insinuating intrusion into knowledge. Tom nodded, grave in understanding. What Marjorie feared most, the power and consequence of shared whispers, of shadowed reflections cast against the living mind. Evelyn closed the journal, hiding the newfound information within its spine's embrace. "I should take this to Father Gregory. It'll guide light in the dark recesses we navigate." As she left, the fog thickened, the shadows intensifying. The deliberate knowledge once held by few now crossed thresholds, inviting the timeless grasp of secrets and specters. Evelyn felt the weight of expectation history had anchored here. She knew then the dark welcomed her challenge, but fear's grip was unwinding, retreating as Evelyn pushed fiercely toward clarity, determined to send the curse into oblivion and usher Gallow Hollow into unobscured daylight once more. The fog clung tenaciously to the morning air, a relentless spirit echoing the ancient secrets it shrouded. Evelyn Hart found herself early at the church, laden with the newfound weight of Marjorie's journal and the shadows of knowledge it unveiled. Father Gregory greeted her with a cordial nod, beckoning her into the warm glow of the vestry. His expression, usually calm and measured, was now underscored by a tension that lent urgency to his words. "Detective Hart," he began, gesturing to several texts spread across a long oak table. "My further translations and Marjorie's accounts collectively unveil a dark history, as dark as the fog that cloaks us." Evelyn settled into a chair across from him, urgency mirroring in her eyes. What emerges from these threads? Back when Gallow Hollow was merely a cluster of makeshift homes, the early settlers faced starvation. The land refused to yield its bounty, Gregory explained, his voice a gravely resonance of the tale. Desperation drove them to appeal to a local mystic, a man skilled in the old ways of shadow and whispers. Evelyn absorbed the words, her thoughts tracing paths through the shadows of history. And this mystic offered a solution? Gregory nodded, his expression solemn. He brokered a pact with an entity that lay dormant within the very earth we tread. Prosperity was promised in exchange for a sacrifice. A soul every decade, tethered by symbols we've come to know. The revelation drew an instinctive shiver up Evelyn's spine, a cold realization of intertwined destinies. Generations trapped in a cycle they could not break. Precisely, Gregory confirmed. The mystic's lineage remained hidden, bound to guard the agreement. Evelyn leafed through the journal, Marjorie's notations describing attempts to remap the village and retrace steps left behind. Did Marjorie discern a way to sever the pact? The priest sighed softly, pressing a hand against the table's edge. She theorized release could reverse roles, trap the entity instead. But at what cost? The metaphysical debt still hungers toward fulfillment, as if by spectral request, the room's air cooled, their breath accompanying words and steam. "Do you think Agnes was taken because of this?" Evelyn asked. Father Gregory hesitated. Agnes's involvement awakened dormant desires, an unfulfilled hunger, seeking completion through any willing or unwilling hand. Vigilance or sacrifice, Evelyn mused, heat rising to her face in light of the impending threat. Her thoughts sizzled, strategy aligning with intuition. Return must mean understanding the initial breach of faith, the stones standing. Before Gregory could respond, the shadow of the afternoon began encroaching on their sanctuary. It christened the western windows with gilded hues, casting watchful eyes over their resolve. The village had gathered for evening vespers, quiet hums lifted in prayer. Evelyn stayed for the service, grateful for strength residing within that modest act of resistance. With twilight enshrouding the church's facade, Evelyn straightened her collar, Marjorie's journal pressed against her as a talisman. Before departing, Father Gregory offered a small but ornate charm. "An amulet," he said, slipping it into her palm, "to ward off those who challenge what ought not be challenged." "Thank you," Evelyn replied solemnly, the metal warm against her skin. Making her way back to the room she'd come to know as an intermediary of challenges grown fixed, Evelyn was alert, the village whispering its laden histories beneath the dispelling sun. Darkness fell heavily that night, the fog all but disappearing beneath the weighted mists of moonless time. Night swelled around her, a coiling uncertainty holding host to hidden threats now realized. Sitting before the firelight with the protective charm intertwined casually among her fingers, Evelyn reviewed her notes, determination bolstered by rage against ancient injustice. The faint sound of something shuffling outside her window pulled her from reflection. Moving in silence across the floor, she edged slightly back the curtain's grasp, met only by the shifting soupy black heft, a shapeless veneer obscuring truths and lies alike. Yet there, movement again, closer, deliberate. Shadows gathering their tide beyond sight, feeling the depth of their presence. A crack like a muffled cry ruptured near, cueing Evelyn to the door where a gentle rattling announced visitors of darker intent. She braced against the door, heart curling with urgency, fear prickling along her veins. Then, the window, an apparent second attempt, shuddering as shadowy figures formed with menacing grace. Instinctively, she palmed the charm, the metal pressing warmth into her cool grip. An immediate veil of energy, tangible and tenacious, propelled outward. The gathering shadows staggered, forms dissipating, snuffed by unseen barriers that seethed against relentless void. Fervor sustained by anger, the charm pulsated resolute strength along its mystical frame. Evelyn opened her mouth, expelling words of defiance into the whirling dark beyond. I see what flees from you with charmed release, back into confines never to roam unsupervised. The shuddering mar calmed their trespass. Fading wraiths pressed firmly against a circle of safeguard, drawn tight, space-bound and immovable. Silence returned, uneasy but resubmitting. Echoes tamed by the amulet's unassuming vigilance. As the echoes ebbed, Evelyn lowered herself near the hearth, a determined flame fueling her heart's resolve. Without pause, her thoughts sharpened, futures cast by knowledge unknown until now. The dawn would witness her determination renewed. Shadows tightly kept bay as she pressed upon forgiveness, not demanded but required. An ancestor's pact could not endure if countered by strength of mind and body, resilient familiarity breaking through the tethering boundaries of past sins. When the shadows insist upon hiding in the light, Evelyn murmured to the night, the only option remains, a resolve to illuminate. With this final thought, she leaned back, letting sleep claim her with its wan embrace, bolstered by the protective charm she now lay flippantly within trusting reach. And yet, the heaviness that had pressed upon Gallow Hollow began its tentative unraveling within her haven's solitude. A restive land daring to breathe again, freed of burdens once unseen, now worn openly in defiance of needless stealth. Tomorrow, she decided, would kindle a new course, the inciting motion to unshrouded light, the confrontation and dismissal of entropic fathers unbidden. With her heart squarely bound to purpose, she welcomed night's uncertain touch with kindness, the fog relinquishing its secrets into her illuminated dawn. The morning light was a paler shade against the dim horizons of Gallow Hollow, as if the sun hesitated to lend its full grace to the specters of the village. Evelyn Hart awoke, a pervading disquiet curling at the seams of her consciousness. A fine line danced between clarity and illusion as her dreams lingered in the air, heavy with images of caverns and shadowy figures lingering close. With a practiced resolve, she dressed and armed herself with her notes, the charm from Father Gregory resting reassuringly against her skin beneath the knitted layers of protection. Yet an unshakable sense resided, a threat perpetually unseen, pulling her gaze to every fleeting shadow. Each step through the village carried a new, unsettling rhythm. Whispers seemed to echo within cobbled stones, around corners where flickers of shadow briefly took form, figures observing her deliberate march. "Stand firm," she murmured, managing a smile as she passed by those few villagers who dared face the open way in morning light, a light thinly interlaced with caution. Yet their eyes carried a somber recognition of burdens unspoken, secrets shared and absorbed into the village's framework. Faces turned quickly away. Too many secrets laid bare within the lingering glances. Evelyn paused in her path, allowing the stretch of silence to enclose her momentarily. Her senses flared as she listened, her focus wandering despite herself toward thoughts coaxed by urgent whispers. Moving once more in time with those ethereal calls for attention, her path led deliberately to Father Gregory's church, a sanctuary offered against the lurking unknown, against impeding madness creeping slowly from the depths. The steady sound of Gregorian chants greeted her, a solemn melody reverberating between time's solid pillars. Father Gregory was engrossed in silent prayers at the altar, maintaining solace within duty's embrace. He turned as her presence entered, a gaze full of understanding, concern etching his features. "Your path grows heavy," he observed, as if cued by something beyond what his eyes could see. "More than heavy," Evelyn replied, her voice a glancing shadow, reality and specter blur perilously. Gregory nodded gravely, the entity and its promises, barriers breaking down, illusions slipping beyond control. "There's more here. I feel it," Evelyn insisted. "The whispers guide me toward the cave at the village's edge. It weaves itself prominently into my waking thoughts." The priest's eyes held steady. It was known among ancients as the Veil's Mouth, sacred yet feared, paths to the hidden heart. Evelyn settled onto the bench beside him, the weight of each whispered shadow born anew within their shared silence. "Do I risk madness in pursuit?" she murmured, seeking the core of choices yet undetermined. Father Gregory glanced toward the light pouring through the stained glass, a wash of color igniting the space between them. Descent or enlightenment? The approach to truth holds both within its binding. The question is, which will dominate? Evelyn felt the charge surge between them, a reaffirmation binding their fates. The realization that her urgent need to confront the foundations whispered anew a meaning, giving logic to the nebulous path. "Take the charm," Father Gregory encouraged quietly, its warmth finding residence in her weary grasp. "Remember, it lends protection, but understanding and bravery spring from within." She took his offering, wrapping the charm deftly around her wrist, a continued tether against shadowed realities. As she left the village's embrace precariously behind, the path was illuminated with a tenuous clarity that quivered, mimicking the fervent flames of predestined choices. Evelyn's journey to the cave unfolded, a gradual overtaking by shadows that skirted the fringes of reason. Each shifting tendril of fog held specters, creations forming from liquid silences. The whispers beckoned in soft, persuasive tones as she neared the veil's mouth, a chasm cloaked in obscurity, depths concealed against the world's rustle. Staring into its abyss, Evelyn's mind mirrored the cave's depths, a flickering bridge over darkness. Determined steps led her forward into the waiting maw, the charm's comfort warming her skin as though echoed by unseen flames. "This is it," Evelyn breathed, hearing the words drift softly, accepted by the cave's encompassing shadows. The whispers enfolded her, a choir of voices murmuring histories, infused with warning and plea. Unseen hands seemed to guide unseen paths, marked as strata from within the darkness. Within the shadows, tangible forms crept closer, dancing with a tangible presence that slipped in and out of comprehension. Evelyn walked steadily, forging through time's fractured moments, realities slipping against one another, reshaping ordinary lines into echoes more phrased. Every shadow held faces, past faces leering in acknowledgement, past secrets intertwined with the present. Struggling against their pull, Evelyn's footsteps struck deeper. Standing within the cave's vibration, awareness electrified her skin. A junction felt upon the threshold ensured she comprehended the enormity not just of paths, but of choices, marking an edge ready to straighten or splinter. Knowledge shifted its scale. The realization she once chased, now chasing her. She saw the form's marvel, a tapestry of truths entered through access and surrender. Emerging thus, Evelyn's understanding flourished like a tendril caught in luminescence. Minds met her spirit as shadows recoiled, slithering back into subdued silence, answering curiosity's compulsion with a graceful slip. At the inchoate barrier, Evelyn realized the whisper not one of madness, but emergence, a grounding of truths, once refrained. At last, she tipped her gaze toward beginnings traced against a fine thread, a way forward lightened by new clarity, knowledge hard won, and voiced within memory's embrace. She retraced steps toward dawn, a return much like arrival, charged by understanding uniquely earned, tinged vital anew. Here, within Gallow Hollow's wakeful curve, Evelyn would face the waiting dawn, truth reflected as it found its restive home. She emerged, the path lit not by resolved separation, but unified alliances combining deep. In her stride lay determination, a stride that voiced new colors set free as she cloaked herself within a morning sky, laden by shadows released into unfolding light, a descent transformed within ascent. Evelyn Hart steeled herself at the entrance of the cave, its gaping maw speaking of ancient things buried beneath its shadowed depths. The whispers that had haunted her shifted in resonance, weaving into an ethereal chant that seemed to resonate from the very bones of the earth. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn stepped into the cave, the darkness closing around her like a velvet curtain. Her flashlight beam pierced the inky black, revealing walls etched with symbols and markings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Every footfall echoed in the hollow chamber as she ventured further, the air heavy with the weight of forgotten histories and untold secrets. The flickering light unveiled alcoves lined with relics of the old world, weather-worn talismans, fragments of vessels, and altars smeared with the patina of age. Beneath layers of dust and neglect, she found remnants of rituals that had taken place here, ancient rites that once echoed with solemn vows and whispered binds. Among them was a journal, its leather cover cracked with time, yet the energy it held was palpable. Evelyn opened the journal with reverence, the pages rustling softly like paper wings. The handwriting was familiar, a neat script that belonged to Agnes. Each entry was a window into the past, revealing fragments of her determined quest. "I've seen it," whispered Agnes's voice through the pages. "The path of shadows that binds our village, a tether spun from desperation and despair. I would end it, break the cycle, but the price, it is steep, perhaps more than one can bear." As Evelyn read, she uncovered Agnes's arduous journey to understand the nature of the pact, the entity awakened by the founders, bound by ritual into feeding upon fear and faith, ever hungry. "This isn't merely sacrifice," Evelyn murmured, drawing parallels between her own understanding and Agnes's insights. "It's a cunning alchemy, transmutation of power into a curse." Her fingers trembled slightly as they passed over diagrams and sigils, the intricate notations detailing how Agnes had attempted to unravel the bonds of darkness. The revelations were clear. Agnes had endeavored to invoke a counter-rite, a ritual to nullify the ancient covenant. Yet there was a cost. The ritual demanded a willing conduit, a soul to bear the burden of the entity's wrath during the unraveling. She was closer than any other, Evelyn whispered, feeling Agnes's presence like an ally at her side. The knowledge hung heavy in the air, the words etched into her consciousness. To end the cycle meant to offer herself, allowing the fury of the bound entity to expend itself, finally freeing the village from its spectral hold. Evelyn contemplated her path, grappling with the gravity of the choice at hand. Am I brave enough, strong enough to be the catalyst for liberation? The cave replied with silence, an echo of sacred truths and eternal shadows. Gently closing the journal, Evelyn stood in the heart of that whispering cavern. the knowledge of what must be done solidifying with each breath. Truth demands sacrifice, she acknowledged softly, drawing courage from the presence of those who had striven before her. With purpose, she gathered the relics necessary to enact the ritual, the elements inscribed within Agnes's notes, and prepared the altar, the air humming with potential. The final entry in Agnes's journal detailed the recitations, a harmony of language old and revered, intended to pass the burden into timeless time, releasing the condemned from its spectral clutches. Evelyn began the incantations, her voice trembling but firm, each word a stone upon which her resolve was built. As she spoke, the cave began to respond, shadows drawing closer as if eager for the unfolding spectacle. The air buzzed with energy, vibrating through her very bones, echoing the rhythmic pulse of ancient heartbeats. Evelyn was no longer herself alone. She was vessel, channel, and key. As the final words fell from her lips, the darkness surged, a torrent of shadowed hands grasping, clinging to the edges of the ritual's circle as if resisting their approaching freedom. Veins of light erupted from the altar, shooting upwards to meet the cave ceiling with a thunderous crack. Their purity unraveled every strand of shadow. Evelyn felt the entity's presence bristle, a monstrous indignation coursing through the chamber, shivering against incorporeal chains. She called upon the charm from Father Gregory, pressing it to her heart as the crown of binding released its hold, a final act of defiance against the shadows. The spectral entity moaned in fury, the sound a crescendo of despair as the culmination of Agnes's work bore fruit in Evelyn's sacrifice. With a blinding flash, shadows peeled away, evaporating into whispered sighs that spoke not of defeat but of liberation, a song only true sacrament may know. Evelyn lay motionless in the fading light, embracing the stillness cradling her, the echoes of broken chains sent to their proper rest. She took a heavy breath, filled with the cool sweetness of air undistorted by darkness, unfettered yet resolute. The specters that haunted Gallow Hollow grew quiet, each phantom thread relinquished from the world's tapestry, weaving into the ether where dreams and memories kissed welcome. Evelyn staggered to her feet, surrounded by the stillness that spoke of journeys ending and circles made whole. Turning back towards the light outside the cave, she bore witness to the metamorphosis awaiting her, basking in the knowledge that through personal cost, a new dawn arose. And so, it was with peace in her heart and resolve in her stride, Evelyn returned to Gallow Hollow, where history awaited to be redefined, and shadows greeted daylight anew. A revelation built upon courage shared among those who stood knowingly upon paths woven from strength. Evelyn Hart stood at the crossroad of history and intent, her feet firmly planted on the sacred earth as Father Gregory and a circle of reluctant villagers gathered around her. The atmosphere was steeped in anticipation, the twilight casting elongated shadows that danced with purpose, heralding an approaching climax. The chosen site for the ritual was a clearing not far from the shadowed mouth of the cave, a place sanctified by time and tale. Here the soil bore witness to countless footsteps of seekers, the reverent and the fearful. Evelyn had shared her findings from Agnes's journal with Father Gregory, whose eyes widened with both awed understanding and the weight of impending action. "We stand at a precipice between what was and what must be," he intoned, his voice a resonant echo that touched each heart among the assembly. The villagers, their faces a tapestry woven of fear, skepticism, and fragile hope, shifted uneasily but held their ground. They whispered nervously among themselves, torn between deeply rooted superstitions and the chance for liberation. "This is the time for courage," Evelyn spoke, stepping forward, lending strength to her words. Together, we can break the shackles of an agreement twisted by darkness. We do this for Gallow Hollow, for our ancestors, and for the future. Under Gregory's guidance, the villagers formed a circle around the altar, which was now arrayed with the ritual relics, symbols of protection, sigils for release, and talismans to guide the spirit. The charm gifted to Evelyn by Father Gregory lay central among them, a bridge between faith and arcane design. Remember, Gregory cautioned, his gaze sweeping through the assembly, our voices must become one, a unity of purpose flowing through the sacred words. Only then can we bind and release. Reluctantly, they began to chant, their voices hesitant at first, but growing stronger as Evelyn led them through the ages-old text that she and Gregory had translated. The chant rose like a wave, engulfing the clearing with resonant power. As the melody of their voices surged, the shadows around them thickened, drawn toward the clearing with a gravity beyond the natural. The air grew heavy, charged with the anticipation of forces ancient and unseen. Evelyn felt it first, a ripple of awareness, a presence unfurling itself from her deepest fears, realized in the subtle sense of dark eyes flickering open. "It's coming," Father Gregory announced calmly, though a thread of tension ran beneath his words. A shiver laced down Evelyn's spine as the ground beneath her trembled slightly, heralding the entity's emergence. The shadows coalesced with increasing intensity, gathering substance and shape from the corner of perception. Within the circle, the air pulsated, reverberating against flesh and bone, and the incantation reached its crescendo, a beautiful, terrible clarity ringing through the night. Evelyn felt the presence distinctly now, a consciousness probing the fringes of the circle's ethereal boundary, aware yet shackled by the ritual's constraints. In the heart of the shadow emerged a form, ebon tendrils unfurling from a central mass, eyes of deep abyss peering from a sketched visage wrought by nameless dread. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, resonating with ancient intelligence and barely contained wrath. The villagers faltered briefly, the entity's visage seizing their resolve with raw fright. But Evelyn's voice cut through, strong and commanding. "Do not yield. Hold the line. We are more than fears given shape." Evelyn's own heart pounded like a tribal drum, matching the intensity of the entity, which stirred a cocktail of her most intimate fears: failure, loss, solitude. The ritual's incantation took a turn, spiraling into words of binding. Each syllable was a chain, clasping the shadow within expanding bounds of light, constraining its essence into yielding compliance born of desperate contrition. The entity writhed, testing its bonds, issuing guttural, resonate bellows that echoed through the night with power enough to split reality's seams. Evelyn felt the pressure at her chest diminish, the charm growing warm again, leeching courage from her unyielding spirit. Back to the depths, she spoke the words with clarity, infusing the final words of the counter-ceremony with her essence, the combined intent of those circled. Her determination coalesced with that of the villagers and Gregory's unwavering belief, entwining to fracture the entity's hold. It was like glass splintering beneath the weight of realization, both fragile and formidable. In one previous defiant roar, the shadows dissolved, dispersing into the ether with whispered screams fading into nothing. The residual energy crackled briefly before being absorbed back into the quiet earth, leaving the clearing silent except for the echo of breathless release. Breathing deeply, Evelyn surveyed the scene, the villagers blinking into the sudden normalcy, their eyes registering awe and restored clarity. "It is done," Gregory spoke quietly, yet triumphantly, lowering his head in prayer and relief. Evelyn felt a profound peace settle over her, her burden lifting alongside the curse's dissolution. The fight had been won, and the price, while great, had initiated salvation for Gallow Hollow. Returning to the path from whence they'd come, Evelyn shared in their collective humility a tempered joy in the newfound freedom, the knowledge that shadows could not forever hold their sway, even here, amid the fog and whispers. As daylight faltered from the horizon, Evelyn found herself looking up, the stars emerging from behind retreating obscurity, burning brightly yet gently, a silent testament to endurance uniquely born. And there, beyond the fog's grasp and beneath the starry dome, lay a future suddenly bright with unshadowed promise. The aftermath of the ritual left Evelyn Hart standing amidst the clearing, the air now a serene cradle of silence. Yet within the tranquility swirled deeper currents, stormy echoes of past misdeeds and unspoken regrets. "You did it," Father Gregory's voice washed over her. A gentle reassurance. Evelyn gave a tentative smile, feeling the warmth of accomplishment mixed with an unsettling awareness that their victory came at no small cost. She felt the energy pulsing in her mind, the tether to the entity's remnants, not yet severed but rather pulsing with unearthed memories. She turned slightly, gazing into the distance where shadows lingered, quivering with unformed thoughts, poised at her mind's edge. "I need a moment," she murmured, stepping back into the folds of herself. The villagers, now dispersing into the night's balm, left her alone with a clear sky above, further galvanizing the reality that the burden she bore now was inextricably personal. Evelyn began a slow circuit of the clearing, shadowed by scenes, timeless and personal, unfurling in rhythmic cascades. In the depths of her mind, vivid visions took hold. Rivers of forgotten experiences flowed, draped in unresolved dues, whispers of guilt laden with urgency. She relived every haunting mistake, a misjudged case, a choice that cost more than she had planned, echoes of times when she stood on the precipice of failure wearing a brave face. Evelyn stumbled slightly, bitterness tainting her resolve. Shadows pressed more aggressively, tugging her attention to bear their darkened testimony. One vision drew her forwards, trailed by the scent of fresh rain upon troubled earth. "Why didn't you save us?" Her brother's voice filled the space around her, alive with accusation and pain. She saw him then, broken and lost to decisions she couldn't change. Reality chiseled deeply into her core. "I tried," she breathed, trembling against the weight of personal reckoning. "I tried so hard." "Fear held you back," he countered, his form shimmering with unreality, a phantasm born of regret. Evelyn clenched her fists, a mix of sorrow and defiance rising within her. "No longer," she whispered fiercely. "I've learned." A cacophonous rustling filled the clearing, phantasms merging to form a tapestry of intertwined past mistakes. Her younger self stood amid them, doubting, second-guessing, the tendrils of indecision stretching like chasms in her path. "You can never be enough." A lifetime of doubts taunted her, voices merging into a chorus she had long labored to mute. Evelyn breathed deeply, the charm Gregory had given her, tingling again upon her skin, reminding her of presence and time rewritten. "I am enough," she spoke aloud, her voice unwavering as she cast her fears into the shadows, the weight dissipating in the embrace of newfound certainty. With each declaration, the figments flickered, phasing in and out of focus before melting away under her steely resolve. Eventually, standing at the core of quietude, she faced the one remaining specter, the entity itself, tethered now not by power alone, but by her past. Emerging from shadows, the entity loomed with tendrils that pulsed menacingly on the cusp of tangible, yet Evelyn saw what it truly was. A manifestation of collective fears, feeding off personal torment. "Your chains belong to me no longer," she declared, glowing with restored strength, the charm against her heart igniting with light. Each piece of her chosen identity affixed anew, emerged more honest, rejecting the wraith's haunting hand, disentangling the bruise of shadow from memory's flesh. The entity, now folding into a retreating tide, howled silently as Evelyn's strengthened essence bore against it, addressing the specter not as victim, but victor. Claiming sovereignty over herself and the village, Evelyn stepped forward, pushing the entity back into the void it was spun from, its threads severed upon her mercy. At that moment, those chains of despair shattered, bound by nothing less than her tenacious will. As the night air settled over the landscape anew, Evelyn emerged through the clearing's ring, standing vigilant beneath a sky now stripped of despair's stigma. Father Gregory, witnessing this personal revolution, joined her, serenity woven into his stride as he beheld the relief etched into her renewed form. "Chains are broken, Evelyn." He spoke with reverence in his tone. She nodded slowly, deeply, the echo of emotion resounding in the cavern of her mind where once shadows held sway. The village beyond, a place neither lost nor entrapped, now stood unhindered before new dawn's first kiss, weaving into the seated peace. Evelyn would face the village, free of apologies and penance, unburdened by past debts that never demanded providence. Here awaited a vibrant future, breathless beneath stars no longer masked by ancient secrets. With poise, Evelyn and Gregory walked onwards, each step carrying unshadowed promise. The promise that brought light amidst risen dawn, untethered silver strings of chance relived, free upon prelude's undulating arc, thus cast new horizons, unconfined by the dark embrace that once held their claim, breaking free at last beneath dawning radiance, inevitably possible. And so it started afresh, to dance unfettered, unwritten, until culmination found its truth displayed in brilliance time had yet to discover. Evelyn Hart stood at the window of her rented room, her gaze drawn to the horizon where the retreating fog unspooled like ghostly ribbons unwound from time's clutch. Gallow Hollow lay before her, its landscape greeted by the dawn of new beginnings. In the days following the ritual, a palpable shift had woven itself through the village. Where once shadows clung and whispers were laced with dread, the air now tingled with quiet hope and promise. "Detective Hart," Father Gregory called, arriving at her door with a knowing smile. Or should I say, "Evelyn? Forgive the intrusion. I come bearing goodbyes." "No intrusion, Gregory," Evelyn replied warmly, gesturing for him to join her. "I've packed most things, but my mind, it's still catching up." Gregory gave a nod, his eyes reflecting understanding. "You've given Gallow Hollow a gift we'll never fully repay. Not just freedom, but courage to reshape our history anew." Together they stepped outside into a morning drenched in possibilities. Villagers moved through streets with lighter hearts, greeting each other with nods that felt less burdened by unspoken fears. Even beyond the stories, they're different, Gregory noted, watching the scenes unfold. It's in their eyes, a sense of independence restored. Evelyn turned toward the familiar path they'd traversed so often, comforted by its intimacy. "I've changed, Gregory. This place, these challenges, they've rekindled something in me." Gregory looked at her with gentle curiosity. "You've encountered forces that test the fabric of belief, not merely in what's beyond, but within yourself." "Exactly," she confessed, feeling the warmth of the sun touch her face, a reminder of new beginnings. "I came to Gallow Hollow driven by duty, perhaps even by old ghosts I dared not confront. Now I leave with clarity." They strolled toward the heart of the village, close enough to almost touch the laid paths where they'd unearthed truths amidst the shadows. As they reached the square, Mayor Klein approached, his step gaining clarity with every passing day since the fog lifted. "Detective," his tone was hearty, genuine gratitude entwined with each syllable. "We've begun healing mirrors the inn you've gifted us. A tethered tempest these lands will recall among the ages." "The parting is bittersweet," she admitted, a serene smile characterizing her features. "You'll always be part of Gallow Hollow, that's assured," Klein said warmly. "Come back any time, though perhaps next time for relaxation rather than duty." They shared a laugh as the statement brushed the newfound buoyancy. Moving on, Evelyn's thoughts floated toward Agnes and her ultimate courage, the sacrifices made for turning this page, and the sacred memory she felt aligning with her, cherishing the intertwining fates of their paths. Gathering herself towards departure, she witnessed the community's rekindling spirit, generations now poised with inner resilience. Maya, sleeves embroidered with playful memories, waved, catching those departing glances. "You ain't gonna forget us, Miss Evelyn?" she asked, the spark of childhood fears dispelled with courage reborn. "Never," Evelyn assured her with genuine mirth, lighting her eyes, each of you echo within partings yet held close. Maya grinned. "You're like a gallywagger daydream, loaded for legend." With a warm chuckle, Evelyn ruffled the girl's hair with affection and promise. As her car neared the village's edge, marked by centuries of dichotomy between protection and solitude, Evelyn's gaze swept Gallow Hollow's fibers one last time. This journey, catalyzed by horror, had been refashioned, yet courage knew no counterpart. Gregory stood at her car's window. "I believe you found part of what you sought, a tangible self exploring its course, charted beyond this horizon." "Yes," she agreed, handing him a notebook. A small token expressing gratitude, filled with insights and hope. "When you left your prior past behind," Gregory began, "did you imagine a more singular road to tread upon?" Evelyn felt the familiar resolve securing her soul, kindled by realizations crafted anew. "Perhaps I secretly hoped. A belief for clarity untangling through shadowed hearts. Until now, my compass was yet undefined. Here, I've met it among paths no longer hidden." She offered a quiet promise with her eyes, one signaling the dawn of extended perspectives grasping futures. The moment stood suspended like an image framed by nature's breath and passing time. Time couldn't fully part, boundless footprints pledged, Gregory offered cryptically, acknowledging ephemeral yet timeless connections intertwined. As Evelyn drove away from the village, a land freed of shadowed burdens, she carried with her a newfound legacy, forged from layers beneath whisper and lore. Further into the path, past the marks of familiar places and now retired spirits, her introspection cleared, underworld in delicate medleys once observed through others' prisms. The road stretched ahead, full of untamed potential. It symbolized freedom, unfettered steps, unburdened by mysteries freshly transgressed. Evelyn's future was ripe with untouched storied measures. Renewed purpose echoed through heartfelt solace and untethered promise. She accelerated gently into the horizon, envisioning forgive return commands, her intentions unweighted anew as daylight softened beyond departure's bequest. Evelyn Hart drove away from Gallow Hollow, the village that had become as much a part of her as she had of it. The road unraveled before her, a ribbon of promise stretching towards a tomorrow imbued with hope. In the rearview mirror, the figure of Father Gregory and a smattering of villagers grew small, waving her goodbye, their silhouettes framed by a sky clearing from clouds towards infinite blue. Gone were the shadows that once haunted her nights, the tendrils of fear and failure now replaced by a calm determination that pulsed through her like a living force. She breathed deeply, feeling the weight of lingering anxieties dissipate, carried away on the breeze like whispers of a too-long-held nightmare. The village, now free from the curse's heavy grasp, was blossoming anew, the people of Gallow Hollow stepping into roles of renewed purpose. Gardens bloomed, laughter echoed across cobblestone paths, and life tingled with the novelty of promise. Evelyn knew a part of her remained there, interwoven with the land's new history like threads of morning light. But the journey had returned to her something invaluable, a sense of self that hadn't existed since the gentle days of untested youth. "I found what was lost," she murmured to herself, the sound of her voice reassuring against the endless cadence of wheels on asphalt. Evelyn gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale but steady. In the deep well of her heart lay new depths of resilience and an understanding of the human spirit born from adversity, darkness unraveled by belief. She had seen fear transmute to strength, had watched uncertainty surrender to courage. The experiences she held, each a gem forged from trial, had crafted an unrelenting tapestry, one she'd carry forward. As the road unfolded, Evelyn allowed herself one final, lingering thought of Gallow Hollow, and in the silence that followed, she thought of the journeys yet unlived. The sun, now breaking free from the last clutches of dawn, spread warmth over the land and embraced the road ahead, illuminating Evelyn's path with the soft insistence of a world rediscovered. The world awaited, and with certainty, Evelyn knew she would meet it unafraid. The open road was infinite, threaded with her light, guiding her ever onward to meet new horizons.